Thank you everyone for coming to our NANOG board candidate presentations. I'd like to just introduce our candidates here. We have Susan Forney, we have David Segal, we have Stephen Feldman, and Ryan Woolley. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and ask a few of the questions, but I'm also going to step over to the side to give the candidates the floor, basically. I'm going to step over here. What? Oh, all right. Oh, I also like to do the introductions. So I'll go ahead and ask everyone to introduce a little bit about themselves. So Stephen Feldman, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Sure. Does this work? Yes. Okay. I'm reading this, so my apologies. I've been in this industry for a long time, and like everything else, it's constantly evolving. We've gone from an ecosystem where the U.S. government controlled everything to one where the power is concentrated in a handful of backbone providers and long-distance telcos, and now to one dominated by a few large eyeball networks and an emerging set of cloud content delivery and other edge service providers. But one thing remains constant. We do our best work by cooperating, by learning from each other, and by educating new generations of network operators. The purpose of a nonprofit board is to set the overall direction for the organization, while the executive director manages the day-to-day operations. The board needs to empower the executive director and staff to carry out the direction. I only have 2 minutes here, but here are 3 strategic areas I believe could use some work. First is education. For example, we should redevelop a set of recurring introductory tutorials which could be presented at most NANOG conferences and remote events. If any of you remember Philip Smith's BGP tutorials, that's what I have in mind. And we should look again at developing full-day classes which could augment the main program and perhaps be done in other venues. Next is outreach. I have been chairing the NANOG on the Road PC subcommittee for the past year and a half, and there's definite room for improvement, particularly in selecting venues and local partners, including local operator groups and colleges. In general, we should develop more partnerships with peer organizations. We already cooperate well with Aaron, but we could try to build or expand relationships with other NOGs, the IETF, and other industry groups and educational institutions. Finally, we need to improve our transparency. The member breakfasts are great for what they are, but getting detailed information as a member is difficult. In a recent search, I wasn't able to find any current financial information, and the board meeting minutes hadn't been updated since June. And informed membership is critical to good decision making, and we can do better. Thank you for your time and your consideration.
All right, thank you, Stephen. Okay, next, Susan, if you don't mind.
Hi, my name is Susan Forney, and I work for Hurricane Electric in the network engineering department. I've been a network engineer for over 20 years. I started out at Boeing, then I went to Microsoft for 15 years, where I was network operations, network engineering, network architecture. I even did a little bit of network tools. I did a short stint at Starbucks as their principal network architect before I moved to Boston 4 years ago to work for a company called the Markley Group, where I built a network for their cloud offering. And I also ran the Boston Internet Exchange. I've been attending NANOG since 2002, NANOG 25 in Toronto, and I have always looked forward to the meetings and look forward to the camaraderie I get here and all the people I meet and the things I find out that's going on in the industry. And I've always thought about it'd be great to be part of it by being on the board. I agree with Steve actually about the need for transparency and the need for maintaining NANOG as a member organization, something that serves the membership. And if I get on the board, that would be what I would like to do.
Great, thank you, Susan. Okay, next we'll have David.
Thank you. My name is David Segal. I've been doing networking in NANOG for a really long time too. My first NANOG was back in February '95, and I didn't know anything about BGP or OSPF or routing in general back then. I'd never sat down on a Cisco, and I would have been dead without NANOG. The NANOG group and coming to the sessions and interacting with folks just took my knowledge to a level where I could run the network. I could actually do my job running a national backbone. And I was the only engineer at the national backbone, which is pretty common back then. So I'm interested in helping NANOG because of what NANOG did to help me. I want to return some back. And clearly NANOG's key mission is education, and there's so much more that NANOG could do to help further that. I think it's really important, like Steve said, to bring back more of the educational programs, to have a strong emphasis on the social aspect and encourage social engagement outside of these sessions, because so much of the learning occurs there, but also recognize that NANOG is important for business as well, and to acknowledge and support the business capabilities. I think my background in engineering and business, the number of businesses that I've had, many, many years in big telco as well as board work, I think it all lends itself really well to being able to help NANOG move on to the next phase of its evolution. But I know all these candidates up here on the stage, and you couldn't do wrong picking any of them. So, best of luck.
Thank you. Okay, last but not least, Ryan.
Hi. My name is Ryan Woolley. My day job is network architecture at Netflix. I run a team of about 25 people who handle architecture and engineering. My first involvement with NANOG was probably a little short of 6 years ago, I think, although I've derived quite a bit of value from presentations and archives prior to that. For the last 4 years, I've been a member of the program committee and helped put together the program at NANOG. It's been an incredibly rewarding experience. And for the last year, I've chaired the program committee as well, which has also put me as an ex officio board member, so I've got quite a bit of exposure to working with the current board. As I'm terming out, I have a sort of a decision to make, either to go find a new hobby or something like that, or to rededicate myself to NANOG and serve on the board, and I think that's what I'd rather do. I think that like I said, the previous experience with working with the board, the program committee, is really quite applicable. I have additional management experience and nonprofit experience in the board of the Florida Internet Exchange Community IX, and I'd really love to continue helping out NANOG.
All right, thank you. Okay, so now we're going to go into the questions. I'm just going to step over to the side here to give the guys the floor. One second. Okay, so the first question I'd like to ask Susan. How did you join the NANOG or the network operations industry and start attending NANOG? Do you think it's easier or more difficult for new entrants into our industry?
I'm sorry, I'm not sure I heard the first part of your question.
Oh, sorry. Okay, I'll repeat. How did you join the network operations industry and start attending NANOG? And then the second part was, do you think it's easier or more difficult for new entrants into this industry?
Well, how I joined was I started out at Boeing, and I was working there, and I wanted to start a career in network engineering. And I honestly can't tell you why I felt like I wanted to do that. I was just drawn to it, and I knew it was what I wanted to do, and I've never looked back. It's always been exactly what I wanted to do. I've always wanted to be a network engineer, and I've loved every minute of being one. And the second part of your question was?
The second part is, do you think it's easier or more difficult for new entrants into our industry?
I don't know. I think network engineering has always been a little bit more difficult, networking, because, well, you can get a PC and learn how to code just about anything. You're not going to be able to get your hands on 100 gig and, light up an, optical network between point A and point B. It's a little more difficult. So it's probably just as difficult as it's ever been.
That's fine. Thank you. Okay, let's see. Ryan, the same question. How did you join the network operations industry and start attending NANOG? Do you think it's easier or more difficult for new entrants into our industry?
I think my first non-hobby interaction, I had quite a hobby interest in networking computers growing up, and a small collection of sons that were networked with the net in the bedroom. But the first non-hobby interest was working as an after-school job for a telco that was just starting an internet service provider operation in about 1994, 1995 in California. And that was the real first hands-on experience with BGP and networking, and I think it was just really well timed. Do I think it's more difficult now? Yes, I think there's a whole group of people, some of whom were represented here, who had similar stories and started about the same time and benefited from that timing. And I think it's difficult to replicate, and it's on us to try and carry some of that knowledge forward.
Okay, thank you. Stephen, the same question. How did you join the network operations industry and start attending NANOG? And then do you think it's easier or more difficult for new entrants into our industry?
Excuse me. So I started as a software engineer, but learned to really love networks when I was in school and got to play with them. I found my way into a networking company and then at a job at MFS where we were providing the May East service. I was invited to NANOG #1 by Elise Garrix to come and talk about May East and the Washington NAP and all the stuff we were building, and discovered I really enjoyed the community and my company was willing to keep sending me back, so here I am. Many years later and several jobs later. As far as difficulty, yes and no. It's different, very different. Back then there were 50 of us at NANOG, so it was a very small community and easy to become part of. Now it's much harder with thousands of people, but there are also many more opportunities than there were. You just have to be willing to push your way in, I think, a little harder than you did then.
Very true. Okay, ask David. Same question. How did you join the network operations industry and start attending NANOG? And do you think it's easier or more difficult for new entrants into our industry?
One of my first jobs in college was, I think the title was Network Lab Administrator, but it involved maintaining a network at the University of Arizona of about 500 PCs running free TCP/IP stacks and DOS, as well as a couple of Sun workstations and stuff like that. And then I, shortly after that, started a Unix network consulting company, and then an ISP. So that's kind of how I landed into it. I think it's easier for people to get into any industry that they have an interest in getting into these days, because there's so many resources available online, regardless of which discipline you want to get in. And network administration, network operations is no exception to that. I do think there's a lot to be said about the community being difficult to get into, though. And that is something that comes up at every NANOG, and that is something that we want to work on as a board, is to help make sure that we're facilitating inclusion in the community, which is different from making sure that the opportunities are there, which they are.
Okay. Thank you. All right, the next question I'd like to ask Ryan. What did you think about the newcomers' lunch? And what, if anything, should NANOG do to ensure that the room is diverse and inclusive going forward?
So being on the PC, I've attended most of the newcomers' lunch. I didn't attend this particular one, but in general, it's a pretty good opportunity to meet people and see what the sort of who's showing up to NANOG, ask them what they expect to get out of the event, and to give them an idea, after talking to them about their industry, give them an idea of what they might want to see. To your question about diversity, I think this is a much longer question, but basically recognizing the various changes that have happened in the networking industry and making sure that we have outreach to those various groups and companies and industries that will represent what we're doing going forward is probably what we need to do to ensure that newcomers lunch is diverse.
Thank you. Susan, the same question. What do you think about the newcomers lunch? And what, if anything, should NANOG do to ensure the room is diverse and inclusive going forward?
Well, I wish they'd had a newcomers lunch when I first started here, because I think it would have been really helpful. I used my opportunity to talk to my table today about the things that NANOG can do for you and how to unlock NANOG a little bit. Gave them some advice on how to get the most out of it and what types of experiences I've had in NANOG that would that I've been able to capitalize on and to allow them to be able to do exactly the same thing. So I think it's very valuable. I think that the way that NANOG is going to be able to be successful moving forward is by gaining more membership and by getting more people in the industry to want to become involved. And so these newcomer lunches are how we do that. We lose people a lot of times after their first NANOG because there's so much here and it's not obvious how to tap into it. And so these lunches are our opportunity to help people understand, how this can work for them personally and for their company as well.
I agree. David, same question. What do you think about the newcomers lunch? And what, if anything, should NANOG do to ensure the room is diverse and inclusive going forward?
I think the newcomers lunch is great, especially how there are mentors assigned to the tables and that they're encouraged to kind of get the people at the table talking. I don't know that happens at the regular lunches, and so in many ways, the newcomers lunch is a much better social networking event than any of the other lunch activities that take place because of that structure. And maybe that's something that could be expanded on. I mean, as far as the diversity, I mean, you get the people that show up. So there's no issue with diversity and inclusion taking place at the newcomers lunch, but how do you make sure that people of all diversities are getting interested in network operations in the first place? And that's a broader issue, more systemic of a lot of different issues that it would be great to try and tackle through NANOG outreach.
Okay, thank you. And Stephen, same question.
I really enjoy these lunches. I've been doing them for quite a while. Today I had an interesting mix of an optical vendor, an enterprise network person, and a few others. One thing that really struck out was they were asking questions like, how do I know what's interesting to me? And so we went through how the agenda is formed and why there's talks about different things. That's not going to be always their favorite topic. The other thing that really struck me this time was somebody was asking, how do I find out about all these side conversations and meetings that are happening? And I had an interesting struggle trying to come up with an answer to that, mostly involved eavesdropping, but that's something I think actually we could do better about. And as far as diversity goes, as mentioned, the tables are self-selecting, so there's not really a whole lot we can do there except maybe pre-assigned tables. But I did, as I said, have an interesting mix of different industries represented.
Okay, thank you. All right, the third question is, can you elaborate on the experience and skill sets that you possess that would help make NANOG more successful? David?
Yeah, I touched on a few earlier, but I think continued focus on education, not just the program material, but everything around that. The free tutorials, reestablishing the education program that I was involved in a few years back, I think is another critical piece. And then finding the right way to facilitate education and learning and social interaction outside of those structured activities is huge. I usually spend more time outside in the hallway and in the bar than I do in the program committee area myself. And also from a business perspective, meetings taking place that are keeping me from all of these educational activities, and creating both structure and unstructured activities for that education, I think is the most critical thing for taking NANOG forward.
Thank you. Susan, same question.
Well, I also believe that the educational programs are really important. I spent a lot of my career mentoring people who are new in the industry and teaching them, how to get started. And I think NANOG has a unique opportunity to, capitalize on that and be a really good forum for that, because we have, a huge amount of industry knowledge here that we could pass on. And I think we've kind of lost our way a little bit. I agree with Dave that I kind of miss those programs we used to have, where Mr. Smith used to come every Sunday night, before NANOG started and have his BGP class. Those are the types of things that I think help, people get a toehold in the industry and understand what's going on. Because like Dave said, you come here and maybe you don't know that much about BGP, or maybe you barely know how to spell it. And maybe you feel a little bit lost because there's, people like Raz who are brilliant, and, and you don't even want to know how to talk to them because you can't even speak the same language. So, being able to, somehow help people introduce into that would be beneficial.
Thank you. Stephen, same question. I can repeat it if you need me to.
Okay. Actually, would you mind repeating what the question was?
Yeah, not a problem. Okay. Can you elaborate on the experience and skill sets that you possess that would help make NANOG more successful?
Okay. I wanted to make sure I was answering the right question. So as I've mentioned, and I'm sure everybody else keeps mentioning, I've been around NANOG for a long time. I've been in a whole bunch of different roles, done a bunch of different things, been on the board before, been on the program committee, wrangled slides, things like that. So I think my knowledge of the institution and what we've done well, and perhaps more importantly, what we haven't done well, will help serve. I do have board experience here and a little bit elsewhere, not a lot. I've been in the network industry for a really long time, and I've managed people, and I don't know what else to say really. I think that with the experience that I have and the outreach that I hope to do, we can fix education and make things better in many ways.
Okay, thank you. And Ryan?
Sure. As I mentioned earlier, my considerable experience with the program committee and experience as an ex officio board member, as well as experience in other nonprofits and managing people in a professional environment, I think make me uniquely qualified. I really do have a passion for the program, and one of the things that I think I can contribute to the board in their function in appointing members of the program committee is considerable time working both on the program and with the members of the PC.
Okay, thank you. All right, our next question is, which of these potential topics would keep you up at night as a board member? NANOG meeting size, diversity, educational outreach, and financial solvency. Susan?
I think probably the one that would keep me up at night the most is the size of the meeting, because the great thing is that we attract a lot of people in the industry to come to this meeting, but there are so many people here, it's hard to have the kind of conversations that we used to have when we were a lot smaller. Like, as Steve mentions, when there were 50 people here, it was really easy to, network with people. But when there are 1,000, it can be somewhat overwhelming. And I think that it would be really beneficial to NANOG to come up with some ways to, break the groups up and get people who have, like interests and minds talking again, and have those conversations that are beneficial and help the meeting, mean a lot more to people, and so people could get more out of the meeting personally, individually, and I think that would be beneficial to us, the community, as well.
Thank you. Ryan, same question.
It's sort of an order of needs kind of thing, but at the moment, NANOG has been pretty good positioned financially, so I don't think that would keep me up at night. I think that's something like attendance that sort of ebbs and flows with the industry. Certainly been great strides in solving some of the problems related to diversity, but I would probably put that at the top of the list is making sure that continues.
Thank you. Stephen, same question.
So I mentioned education at the top of my list earlier, and that still is at the top of my list. I think we can and need to do a much better job than we have been about providing educational opportunities for each other and especially for up-and-coming engineers. Meeting size is what it is in a large sense. We're now where thousands of people is normal, and we have to make sure we can deal with that. And as some of my colleagues have mentioned, creating opportunities for smaller groups to interact probably is part of that. Making sure we have the sufficient space is part of that. Financially, it seems like NANOG is doing quite well, to the point where actually I think it's almost time to start questioning what to do with all this money that we have. Now, granted, there's going to be a downturn at some point in the future. I can predict that safely. I can't say when, but it will happen. So we need to be able to deal with that. But that said, we could take the money that we have and invest it in expanding outreach, education, things like that. And diversity comes with everything else. We need to make sure that we are attracting and encouraging the right people to come.
Okay, thank you. And David?
Yeah, as I said earlier, educational outreach is my number one thing. There's a lot of room for improvement there as far as how many different places we're able to get the word out, and how many different avenues there are for not just bringing people into this forum for education, but taking the education back out to where people can consume it. And that, I think, is the equalizer. That's the leveler. If there is education available that's readily available, diversity becomes less of an issue, money becomes less of an issue, although it's not really one for the board right now. Certainly the meeting size, I think, is a challenge, and it's not, to me, the number one thing. I think we could get creative as NANOG grows, and we do need to do all the things that Susan said in terms of finding ways to break things up and engage that folks and enable the social interaction that's critical, but definitely outreach is the number one thing for me.
Okay, thank you. Okay, the last question is, what is your opinion of the direction of NANOG, and where would you like to see the organization go in the future? Stephen?
I think I've mentioned this, but I think education really is the number one issue now and going forward. applaud all that's been done, but I believe that there is still a lot of room for improvement, and hopefully I can help us move in that direction.
All right, thank you. And Ryan?
Sure. I think the healthy attendance reflects the fact that it's actually in pretty good shape. As I mentioned previously, I think that there's a need to continue to make sure that the program is relevant, that we're addressing the areas of networking that are that sort of matter as we're in a world where there's a sort of post-consolidation in telecom and changing shape of what networking looks like.
Okay, thank you. And Susan?
Well, I think that, it's going back, touching on the same themes of, that education's important and the size of the meeting's important, and making, making NANOG better. I've never been a person, I think NANOG is great. I've loved coming here, for 16 years. It's drawn me back, so it can't be that broken, right? But, but I think that, that there's always the possibility you can make something better. Everything can always be better. And I think that whatever my fellow candidates have touched on as far as, making the meetings more inclusive, making them, making education more available, and expanding NANOG so it reaches out. And so it speaks to the members so that the people who belong to NANOG feel like this is their organization and they have the chance to be part of it, and they can relate to it.
Thank you. Okay, last but not least, David.
The only thing I'd really add to the stuff I've already said around education and outreach and everything else is to also acknowledge that there's a lot of business that gets done here, and the business that gets done takes those business people out of the educational meetings. So even though maybe business is not part of the NANOG mission, acknowledging that that is part of the program, and that those business folks that are involved in those meetings, that they have a lot to bring to the educational program, creating some structure and some time that's set aside for business meetings to occur that doesn't conflict with the regular program in the educational, which I think would be beneficial to the mission, and that's something I'd like to see added to everything else I talked about today.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so that's the end of our questions. We'd like to open the floor to the audience for Q&A. If you had anything to ask any of the candidates, now is the perfect time. So if anyone wants to step up.
Ryan Donnelly from Salesforce. This is a generic question for all four of you. Obviously, in any high-functioning board, there's conflict, disagreement, and that's a good thing. But earlier this year, we had some inter-board conflict or intra-board conflict leak out into social media. How would you manage conflict within the board and make sure that it remains productive for the organization?
Anyone can go first.
I'll go first. No one else is. So conflict is hard. I hate conflict. I don't deal well with it, but I also manage it pretty well, I think. One of my roles as the first NANOG board chair was to manage conflict among the board members and try to manage it to the point where it didn't leak out when it wasn't necessary beyond that. So we had internal conflicts, we dealt with them, we moved forward, we came to consensus, and we did the right thing. I've been a peacemaker most of my life, so I don't see, I do see that as an important part of participating on the board, and I certainly would continue doing that going forward. Wouldn't sleep, but I would do a pretty good job of it.
Okay, David?
I think productive conflict is crucial to the operation of any committee or any team. And you've got to have plenty of that, and that's why diversity on the board is so important, because without people coming from diverse places to bring in vastly different opinions, it can be very difficult to create enough conflict to have that driving force. Now, I don't think that's the kind of conflict you're talking about, Ryan. There's unconstructive, unproductive kinds of conflict, and we have to deal with those things when they come up as professionals. And deal with it in a professional way, and that conflict can't be personal. It can't be directed in a personal way, and if it is, that is unacceptable and something that we all have to shut down.
Ryan?
Sure, yeah, I think that's an interesting example. Not everyone's going to go home happy in every conflict, but there were certain things that the board agreed on that I think were net productive and were improvements that will apply to future conflicts and issues that are related to sort of the issues that drove that and not related. But I think the output of that was sort of visiting some of the things that appeared in the bylaw changes, for example. But yeah, I don't think there's going to be a perfect solution in every case. It's just finding the best possible compromise.
And Susan?
I think that with the advent of social media, and the fact that you can tweet everything, but maybe you shouldn't necessarily do that, has complicated things like boards for places like NANOG. But I guess when I was a manager at Microsoft, passions ran high on my team about ways we should do things. And what I would always tell everyone was that at the end of the day, you may not like everyone, but you have to respect them. And if you maintain that respect, even if you're that person is not going to be the best man at your wedding or the godfather of your children, then you're going to be able to maintain a working relationship that is going to be productive, and that where we can express our differences and express our opinions without tearing everyone else apart. And that's really the critical element. And when we get to the point where we don't respect each other, that's when we have problems and with conflict that can't be contained and isn't productive.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone else have any questions? Okay.
Hi, Aaron Atach, Akamai. This organization basically was able to put me directly into the workforce. I owe pretty much a lot of my career to NANOG. One of the unfortunate things, though, was that while I was a college student, I wasn't a part of NCI because I didn't have professor sponsorship. And a lot of the colleagues that I asked, hey, do you want to come to NANOG with me? They couldn't necessarily afford it because for a college student to come to NANOG, it's about $1,000, even with the student registration. So my question to the candidates is, how are you going to improve education in terms of getting more college students to NANOG that don't necessarily have professor sponsorship or like a professor that wants to come along with them?
Okay. Ryan?
I believe we have a scholarship program. I don't actually have a whole lot of personal familiarity with that, but it sounds like that's something that is worth taking a closer look at.
Stephen, David?
I agree. I don't know a lot about the sponsorship program either, but if it could be expanded through contribution or otherwise, it might enable you to do that without the chaperone.
Stephen?
There is a scholarship program. I don't know the numbers, but it's fairly small, so certainly we could look at expanding it. The other thing, I would turn it around the other way and try to do a better job of outreach to the faculty of these institutions and not just keep using the same three over and over again, because that is pretty limiting.
Susan?
I also don't have information or numbers on the scholarship program, although I was aware we had one. But I think that one of the things we could do a little bit better is that NANOG travels around, and it's in different cities. And so perhaps, a good strategy would be to, reach out to institutions, universities, colleges that are close by wherever NANOG is going to be, which would cut down on the travel costs and allow more students to attend. And then we could make those dollars for the scholarships go a little bit farther and get a few more people in here so they'd have the opportunity to see this and get a better start in their careers.
Definitely. If I just could quickly follow up, I believe somehow this got confused with sponsorship and scholarship. So with the NCI program, you need professor sponsorship. Like a professor from your institution has to apply to NCI, say, hey, I want to bring some students along, et cetera. But if you don't necessarily have a professor that has that time or just wants to do that, you as a student have to just go to NANOG out of pocket.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that goes back to what Steve was saying with respect to better outreach to the professors so that they understand the value of the program and can get engaged.
Yeah, that's orthogonal to the question of more scholarships or better publicity around the scholarships and better outreach in general.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Trevor Williamson, Ball State University. It's somewhat of an addendum to his question. People at other universities that I've talked to haven't exactly been aware that this NCI is even a thing for students that they could work with their computer tech programs to send them to. How would you guys increase awareness of that this is a thing, this is here, here's some opportunities that we have?
I can take that one. I think we've had a number of submissions, including today, from folks who are in academia, and I think reaching out to those folks to see if they have anyone in their network who should be made aware of the NCI program would probably be an excellent start.
One of the challenges that we faced on the education committee as we were trying to get people to sign up for structured education and to pay for that to corporations or universities or whatever was a lack of advertising and really a lack of marketing strategy on behalf of NANOG. There's been some limited direct marketing that's been done, but nothing major. So, part of the outreach puzzle for NANOG, whether you're trying to make awareness of NANOG itself for anyone who wants to pay to come, or whether you're trying to reach out to universities to engage at an earlier phase while people are still learning about this industry, is a marketing challenge. So we can solve the marketing challenge and put some of those resources that we have against that problem that helps self-solve some of this awareness issue, because it's really just about getting your message out there regularly, often, frequently, until you're heard by the professors, by the potential candidates.
Anyone else?
I was just to tack onto that a little bit. I agree with everything. NANOG does have resources. It seems eminently reasonable to consider expanding the staff if needed to help with these outreach programs. Depend on an employee rather than an unpaid volunteer to do the outreach, and to have an actual program rather than random who I happen to know this week. But yeah, we can do a lot better, and we have the resources to help make it better, I believe.
I also think that we could do better. I also think that we have probably a lot of alumni from the different universities and colleges that we could use right here in NANOG to reach out to those organizations and encourage them and impress upon them the importance of participating in NANOG. And we might be able to use that to up participation a little bit and get more students in here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next question.
Michael Sinatra, ESNet. This is more of a procedural question, but if I had questions about how the election process works, or I have concerns about that, where do I go as a member? And who is on the election committee? And if I have questions, do I go to them, or what do they actually do? That would be good to know.
Okay.
And I'm not asking for myself, I'm asking for all the new members out there.
Thank you.
I'm not sure that's for the candidates to answer, though, is it?
Yeah, it's not. That's why I waited till the end.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
So the
Patrick,
election,
Patrick, could you answer that, please?
Please.
I'll give myself 1 minute. So the elections committee is me. It is Sean, stand up, Sean, wave, and Michaela. The elections committee is a board-assigned subcommittee. We get 2 board members and then a community member, and I think we're trying to expand that to 3 community members instead of 1. There's an email, elections@nanog.org. If you have any questions, send that in. It is monitored by the elections committee and by staff. Staff tend to be better at responding because, they're useful and read their email as opposed to me. I forgot the rest of your question. I'm sorry. What else was it? How does it work? So the elections committee is not designed to do things like pick the candidates. We are there to help the candidates do things like know that they were nominated, ask them to fill out their forms, and answer their questions. This is not like some of the other organizations around. I'm going to run out of time, sorry. It's not like some of the other organizations around where the elections committee actually chooses a slate. Everyone who has volunteered, everyone who is nominated and accepted the nomination is on that stage right now. No one was cut out because of the elections committee. The elections committee cannot do that, okay? That's very important. Now, if you're nominated and you personally decide that you don't have the time or don't want to be on the board, then you can unnominate yourself, and that's obviously just fine too. Any other questions, or did I answer everything you needed? Okay.
Perfect.
So Sean Kennedy, I'm on the Elections Committee, as you know, and I'll ask one last question of the candidates. Could you tell us, recount one of your most memorable NANOG experiences or moments, and tell us a little bit about that and why it was special for you?
Okay. Susan?
Well, the last time I was up here, I told you about the time that Doug had the Star Wars theme playing when he came up to the peering boff, which was hilarious. But I'll share you a different memory that someone else hoped I would have said the last time, which was I met my husband at NANOG. And so, so that is probably one of the most memorable things that's happened in my life, and it happened here at NANOG.
Thank you. Oh, David? Yeah.
It is pretty hard to top that. I did not meet my wife at NANOG. I did bring her to one, though. It was very eye-opening for her as to the kind of people I hang out with. She knew exactly what she was getting into. There is no single experience for me. Just so many nights staying up until 4 o'clock in the morning, talking to Dorian, talking to Sean Capshaw, talking to Dennis Ferguson sometimes, or drinking scotch with Tony Lee at Cisco back in the early days. I mean, the formation of the internet community at that time, and just the camaraderie and exchanging of war stories and everything, that was, I mean, that period of time in my early NANOG years, that's what I remember the most.
Thank you. Steven?
Well, last time I was up here, I think I told the Target story, so I'll tell a different one. This was back to the meeting that we had in Austin a while back, where Merit was undergoing some changes, and people like Patrick were going around saying, we need to do something about this. And I remember thinking about it during the course of the NANOG, and by the end of it, agreeing with them that, yeah, things needed to change around here. And then thinking, oh shit, what have I got myself into now? So the result is what we see here today, and I think we did pretty well.
All right, right.
I'm not sure there was a specific incident that led to this, but I think it's a general realization that there were other people, and as I started coming to NANOG, that there were other people solving the same problems, and it was really not that big of a world. As I started to meet more people, realizing that there were folks I could talk to about specific technologies or applications, just realizing that I sort of wasn't alone in the things I was working on.
Okay, thank you. Are there any more questions? Don?
All right, and the final housekeeping from the Elections Committee, the election voting is open. You can access it through the Big Pulse website. You should use your NANOG member ID, and there's some instructions on the NANOG website, the elections website, if you get lost with that. You also need to make sure that you use your NANOG password and not something that's auto-filled by your password manager for a different Big Pulse account. If you need any help, Elections at NANOG is the best place to go, but we'll also have a help desk after the members' breakfast tomorrow. You do need to be a NANOG member in good standing to vote, but there's some of you in this room that aren't members. You can still join. You can join up until Wednesday. You can also renew your membership and vote. As Ryan Donnelly mentioned in the opening, we made a proposal for significant changes to the bylaws, and the board will be discussing those with the members at the members' breakfast tomorrow morning. But the full red line of those changes is posted to the elections website. And I'll stay around afterwards. I believe Michaela and Patrick too. So if you have any questions, just grab us right now. And thank you.
Thank you. All right, that's the end of the presentation. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, candidates.